Welcome everyone to another Stop BS Now English class podcast. Today I am joined by Kevin Chen, our medical nutrition expert, and the lady in the background there looking over my shoulder. And today we're covering or discussing. What are we discussing again?
The book Holes.
By
Louis Sachar.
Louis Sachar. Okay, good. Usually I discuss more serious books like Hamlet and 1984. But I think a lot of books intended for young people are surprisingly meaningful and have some hidden, shall we say, subtle messaging. Would you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hidden messages that the author is trying to say through their book, but a lot of young people who are reading it might not be noticing those messages.
Right. It might seem like just a young boy's adventure, but there's actually some useful information here. Let's explore that. Where would you like to start, Kevin? Maybe we should start with a reading of the first paragraph, and then you can comment on it.
Okay. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There once was a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry, flat wasteland.
Yeah. Well, by the way, does Green Lake actually exist somewhere?
I don't know actually, Peter, does it?
Oh, it may have slipped your mind. I think we researched it, or maybe it was with another student. There is an actual Green Lake in Texas.
Is it actually a lake or is
it is. It has water in it to this day. So the story appears to be set in the past or the future. What do you think?
the future? Because currently Green Lake does have water, so maybe they're saying in the future there won't be water at Camp Green Lake.
Yeah, so maybe the author was exploring the possibility of some severe climate change coming to Texas. That is possible. They've had some dry spells there, especially, well, not there, but in California. Okay. Camp Green Lake. Is it really a camp?
Well, not really. It's more like a juvenile detention facility in the eyes of the public, but in the eyes of the person who actually runs it, it's a slave camp where she uses child labor to attempt to find some buried treasure.
Very good. Good summary. What do you think of the parents of the children, the parents who send their children there?
I think the parents who send their children there think that their children will actually be developing their character there through digging, and I don't think they know how the extent of how little the warden actually cares about the campers over there.
You're right. I think they're too trusting.
Too trusting of the justice system and the government, maybe.
Oh, you just brought up the justice system too. Um, could
Oh
you
yeah,
expand a little?
yeah. Another thing about the justice system was that Stanley, the main character in the book Holes, was actually wrongly convicted by the justice system, and they were unable to find out the fact that he was actually innocent, which really says something about our justice system.
Oh, you're making it a connection to the real world.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's important, not to think that fiction is just a fantasy story with no connection to the real world. Um, the author may have been trying to suggest something about the real justice system. As you say, it says a lot about our justice system. Are you aware of any problems in Canadian or American justice systems?
Well, I feel like the justice systems might also sometimes wrongly convict some people, and they might not be able to actually find out their mistakes until much later on.
Right. Um, I think there are about maybe 3 million, or is it 2 million prisoners in the United States?
That's a lot of prisoners.
Yeah, and somehow they managed to keep that population large by, I think, being overly zealous in their arresting and in their in creation of laws that what's the word, broaden the definition of illegal behavior. So we're
That's
living
really
in that right now. I can't walk in through the nearby park unless I want to risk 1 year in prison. Um, I don't think that's right. I don't think they're going to prevent any coronavirus cases by stopping me from walking in the park. Um, in fact, I can make a nice parallel here. A, a and a disease specialist recently mentioned that allowing people to walk freely through parks, spend time in the sunshine, is extremely healthy, and that usually means the end of the flu season.
Yeah, and talking about that, I think spending time outside could actually be really healthy for you because you would not only be exercising, but also getting that shine from the sun could also give you some vitamins, some important vitamins.
Yeah, specifically vitamin D. That's I often say that every school should teach children the importance of supplementing with vitamin D if you live in a temperate climate like Canada, no sunshine in the winter, not to mention the fall. We might as well say all the seasons because we do spend a lot of time indoors, and when we're not indoors, a lot of clothing is on us, or we're inside cars. Um, is this relate? Are we off on a tangent, or is this related to the novel?
I think we were talking about how healthy it is to be outside, and we were talking about how in Canada we don't get the sun as often, and even when we do, we don't spend enough time outside in the sun, and how being outside can be healthy for you because it would provide vitamin D.
Right. And did I think I asked you, how is this related to our novel?
Well, in our novel, they're spending a lot of time outside and in the sun.
And prior to that, what was Stanley's condition and what was his condition afterwards?
I think Stanley, his condition before was he was a bit overweight, and afterwards, I feel like he was a lot healthier after spending a lot of time digging, which was good exercise for him, and being in the sun, getting his vitamin D.
Right. Um, we spoke briefly about the global warming issue.
Um,
There's
yeah,
one more bit of evidence. What's it called? The yellow spotted lizard. When I first read that, I thought, I don't think there are yellow spotted lizards in Texas. I've never been there, but I know my geography and some of my zoology. So I checked it, and what did I discover? What did we discover?
well, we discovered that there weren't actually yellow spotted lizards, and that yellow spotted lizards, there were no yellow spotted lizards that could actually give you a bite that would kill you. And so this claim in this novel is actually false.
Right. The yellow spotted lizard's natural habitat is well south of Texas. I think southern Mexico is the northernmost extent of its range. How could it end up in Texas?
Maybe somebody brought them to Texas.
Oh, could you, maybe you could, do you remember the connection to global warming?
Yellow spotted lizards.
Yeah, why would global warming change its range, its habitat range?
Um, Maybe it would destroy its habitats, or it would make its habitats no longer as easy to live in.
Yeah, perhaps, or if the temperatures are warming up further and further north, it might travel further and further north. That's already happening. It's been happening for many years. I think that's been documented with regards to larger animals and weeds that didn't, that usually belong to further south. They're moving further north, new types of weeds. I think the opossum was never in this area of Canada before, 30 years ago, perhaps. It could be global warming. I'm not sure, but it seems to make sense. Perhaps we should speak about, well, anything come to mind?
Well, there's a lot to come to mind when you think of holes. There's a lot of secret underlying messages that the author might be giving about like climate change and health
Right.
and outside.
When Stanley first arrives at the correctional facility, the slave labor camp, he notices, or the narrator notices that, who is this? Like a receptionist? He's eating a lot of sunflower seeds. And he says, I quit smoking last month. And he's eating sunflower seeds instead. At first I thought, okay, curious detail. But there's a lot of food in this story.
Yeah, and I feel like another thing is that not everyone might know that sunflower seeds are actually extremely beneficial to someone's health. And the fact that he quit smoking and the fact that he's eating a lot of sunflower seeds could connect, because eating a lot of sunflower seeds could help his body recover to what it used to be and its full health before he started smoking, and it kind of ruined it a bit.
Absolutely. Good point. Let's see. Oh, the rattlesnakes. Yeah, rattlesnake tattoo on his arm. It doesn't seem like I don't want to stereotype, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be the most pleasant camp when the guard has a rattlesnake tattooed on his arm. Maybe not entirely kid friendly.
Yeah, and this camp is for kids actually. It's not accepting any adults or anything. It's a juvenile detention facility.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. You want to tell us a little bit about Zero?
Well, Zero is this kid. He is actually closely involved with the fact that Stanley was arrested because Zero had thrown shoes that belonged to Clyde Livingston, a famous baseball player, and he took them from a I believe it was a shelter, and he took them because he thought he was like allowed to take them. And then when he was about to get caught, he threw these shoes over the bridge, and he still got caught and sent to Camp Green Lake. But then these shoes went over the bridge and they went into Stanley's backpack. And then they also caught Stanley with the shoes in his backpack, and as a result, Stanley was sent to the same facility. And eventually they met and found out what had actually happened. And he's called Zero by the camp counselors and all of the other kids at the place because they think that he doesn't have a brain, and that might be because whenever they talk to him, he doesn't talk back. But later on, we realize that this is only because they aren't treating him well, and he doesn't want to respond to their questions.
Right, and he is quite bright, and a good person. Let's see. So part of the story is about racism. It's very possible in America that if a white boy had run away with a pair of basketball shoes, he would just be reprimanded and maybe warned. But the black boy was arrested. Well, to be fair, in this story, both Stanley and Zero get thrown into this correctional facility. Seems to be treating everyone equally badly.
Well, amongst the boys, actually, I remember a quote from the book Holes was that Stanley was glad that there weren't any racial differences because a lot of the boys were different races. So I think in the camp itself also they didn't really have too much racism issues. But I get the connection you're trying to make to crime and how people would treat a certain race caught in a crime.
Yes, yeah, but presently, I think there are more blacks and Hispanics in prisons in the States for sure. I'm not sure about Canada, and of course, people will blame that on racists will blame it on racial factors. I suspect economic factors are more important. Yeah, I think your frame is too small for you. You keep popping out. All right. Let's explore. Well, maybe before I forget it. Presently, we are in this coronavirus emergency, as they call it. And I have seen various newspapers referring to independent-minded people as COVIDiots. COVID idiots.
Oh.
So insulting people who refuse to accept government policy that dictates how they should socialize, move about their communities, and so on. I find it's another form of racism, but do you think that's fair? That I'm lumping together racism and people who discriminate against independent-minded people who don't believe in the corona drama?
I think there can be a logical connection between both of them because they could both be seen as forms of discrimination, though I don't think it really has to do with racism because the discrimination isn't against anyone of a certain race, but they're definitely both forms of discrimination.
Right. The discriminators will say, of course, well, we're trying to protect society, keep everyone healthy and alive. But the independent-minded or the dissidents, as we call them, will disagree and say there is no danger. Or they might say life is short and I want to take my chances. So yeah, I do think it's similar. You know, there's no basis for discriminating against any race, and I don't feel there's a good basis, no good scientific basis for discriminating against people who reject the COVID-19 policies. And even if there were a scientific basis, there's no reason their right to move around freely should be denied. You know, maybe give them another place to live if you can't resolve your differences. but don't give them a choice between being locked up in a house and being locked up in a prison. Anyway, that's my 5 cents, 2 cents on that connection. We should probably go, there's an interesting name too, X-ray. It really highlights the medical and health theme of this novel. I haven't explored it yet. See if there's any more depth to it. Well, they do abandon X-ray, so maybe that symbolizes X-ray is not one of the heroes, and X-rays are not that useful. I don't know. I'm guessing, speculating. Let's talk about the other doctor. There were 2 doctors in this novel.
So there was Sam the Onion Man, and then there's the doctor who would give your usual medicine, the conventional doctor. And it was said in this story that in the town of Camp Green Lake, the people they didn't want to take any chances. So whenever they would get sick, they would not only see the doctor whose name was Dr. Hawthorne, but they would also see Sam the Onion Man, and they would get both of these treatments. And when they get better from their sickness, then nobody would know who had actually cured it.
Right. And by the way, Dr. Hawthorne, do you know what a hawthorn is?
No, what is a hawthorn?
It's another tree. So we're back to the nature theme again. But I don't think hawthorns produce any edible fruit, nothing medicinal.
So maybe there was a secret message that Dr. Hawthorne was actually useless, and it was actually Sam the Onion Man who was doing it. And the author was trying to actually give the readers this secret message, since hawthorns wouldn't actually be useful for any conventional medicine either.
Correct. You read my mind. In fact, while Zero and Stanley are climbing God's thumb, there's an incident where Stanley slides down the mountain and has to clutch a thorny bush, and it actually helps him briefly. But that's about as useful as thorn bushes are in this novel. It didn't cure Stanley, at least not nutritionally.
Yeah, and we also see further proof of onions actually being really medically useful, because we see Zero being sick while they are on God's thumb, and he's doing some throwing up too. And then on God's thumb, they only drank dirty water and ate onions. But somehow after this, Zero got better.
Yeah, and they did that for 7 days. And I wasn't able to identify what Zero's illness was, but it seemed to be intestinal, digestive. So somehow Sam the Onion Man's onion cure worked for Zero.
And also, onions as a diet on its own are also really healthy, because as I'm seeing on the book right now, Peter, Sam has a donkey named Mary Lou, and Mary Lou is almost 50 years at that time in the novel, which was and still is extraordinarily old for a donkey, quoting the book. And her diet is literally nothing but raw onions, and yet she's living a lifespan that is extraordinary for a donkey, and that really tells you something about having onions in your diet.
Yeah, I don't think the author was just trying to be funny. I think there was a message here. Now, personally, I can't eat whole onions. I do try to put large amounts of onions in my raw salads, but wow, imagine that, eating them for 7 days or your whole life. I think there's some evidence that onions are good for, or somehow even can correct mistakes or errors in your DNA. I recall reading an article of that sort. What else are they good for? Was it cancer?
I think it was good for preventing lots of diseases such as cancer and perhaps
Yeah,
disease.
diseases that are much more serious than our COVID-19. Um,
I think there was like an antioxidant in the onions that helped a lot.
oh, very good. I think you're right there. We went off on a tangent, but no fear, we'll go back to Sam and Miss Catherine Barlow. That will reintroduce the themes of racism and justice. Would you like to comment?
Um, oh, we were talking about the theme of racism and injustice in this novel, and Catherine Barlow and Sam the Onion Man, and how the race of Sam affected how the people of the town received her affection for him.
Oh yeah, we were going to go into the racism of the story and the justice system.
Yeah.
Correct. So yeah, we were talking about the two doctors, and then we went into a tangent. We're back now, talking about the racist or racism theme. What created the conflict between Kate and Sam and the justice system?
So the thing about Kate was that she was a woman that almost every man in the town would love to have her affection, and Sam on the other hand is black, while all of these men are white, and Kate is also white. And in this setting of the story, the justice system says that it is against the law for a Negro, which is their name for a black man, to kiss a white woman, which is an extremely racist law that comes from a racist government. And after this happens, the justice system decides to punish them for it by burning down her schoolhouse and then killing Sam later on.
Right, and I thought I had a different word here. Oh yeah, a different highlight. So in this story, we have the sheriff. What's his name again? I forgot. Not important. The sheriff to whom Catherine goes for help, she finds he's drunk.
So
And
yeah, he's actually the sheriff was also on duty at that time, and he was drinking on the job.
right. So my suggestion was this isn't just a random detail, an interesting detail in a fiction story. This is the author commenting on the police force in his country. They are not entirely, let us say, sober. I haven't seen them drinking on the job here myself personally, but I have read that drug use isn't uncommon. Steroids, for example. What else happens after this this moment? She goes to the sheriff for help. He wants a kiss from her, very insulting. She wants justice, and she slaps him before she leaves. He says, God will punish you and the law will punish Sam. Anyway, she runs back to Sam and they try to escape. What happens?
they shoot Sam.
Right. There's a bit of almost a lynching.
And but they and this is another part that proves their racism is that they were both trying to escape together, but they only shot Sam, and Catherine Barlow was rescued against her wishes because she was white and Sam was black. So
Yeah.
while they were willing to kill Sam, they weren't willing to kill Catherine.
Right. And maybe if Catherine wasn't beautiful, they would have shot her too.
Yeah, another thing was that every single man in that town wanted Catherine to marry them, and so they would not kill her.
Especially possibly the most powerful man in town, who his name is.
Trout Walker.
Right.
And his father actually owned a part of the lake.
Okay. Yeah, it's the elite, the ultra wealthy, and I wanted to ask, how did he get this name, Trout? His real name is not Trout. It's I forget, but do you remember?
Yeah. So his name Trout came from his feet. So he has a foot fungus which cannot be cured, and he shares the same kind of foot fungus that Livingston, who would live later on, also had. And Clyde Livingston was famous, and also Stanley's father was trying to cure this problem. But anyways, this foot fungus made his feet smell really bad, like the fish trout.
Correct. Or maybe like a dead fish.
Trout.
What did I say about that earlier? We during your research into onions, did we find any connection between onions and odors?
I think onions would make your mouth smell better.
Yeah, although a lot of people think quite the contrary, that eating onions makes your breath bad, but that might be a consequence of a generally unhealthy diet, and then you're not digesting onions very well. There is, what's the word, a history of using onions to neutralize bad smells. Just put a raw onion in your kitchen near a sink, near a garbage can. It will help absorb the bad smells. We no longer do that. We prefer to buy chemicals. And personally, what's my own personal connection to foot fungus?
I think you mentioned, Peter, that you have a foot fungus that you're struggling with, but after you changed your diet to healthy raw salads with onions, which were very beneficial to everyone,
Right.
then you managed to get rid of it, as well as many other health problems, which again is one of the countless proofs on how powerful onions are for your health.
Right. Well, a minor correction. I didn't really introduce onions, except for green onions, into my diet until maybe a year ago. I've been on a raw food diet for 3 years, maybe longer than that now. And I did that in order to cure my autoimmune disorder, to treat it. It's been remarkably helpful. And yes, I had a recurring foot fungus, not only in the summer, but anytime my feet warmed up a little, foot fungus would come back. It was mostly just an itch, but that has stopped since the radical shift or change in my diet.
Yeah, it's interesting how our diets can actually prevent lots of health problems and also cure many health problems.
Right. Perhaps that's not emphasized enough or even taught in schools. Maybe we think our stomachs are like gas tanks. We just put stuff in, it just gives us energy. But it's also providing us with all the nutrition needed for cells to be replaced, to be repaired, and to be healthy, not just energized with calories. There's a little more dietary detail, the share of drinking his cup of coffee. I'm not sure if I want to classify caffeine as a drug, but we know it has a drug-like effect. And unless you drink it black, just not very healthy for you. Let's see, I think I have a few more things I'd like to discuss. We mentioned how many trees are growing on this camp, by the way?
So there are only 2 trees that grew on this entire camp, and these two, in between these 2 trees is a hammock, and the only person who is allowed to use this hammock is the warden, who is the person who created this corrupt slave camp and managed to trick the government into trusting it.
Right. Only it's called Green Lake, but there are no lake and there's no trees. I wonder if there's a connection. For many people might assume that trees disappear because of climate change, but I think it's humans removing trees that causes climate change. Specifically, changes in precipitation. Without trees actually attract rain. They don't just welcome rain. They have a chemical interaction and electromagnetic bond with clouds, the atmosphere. So it's been documented and reported by many people who have witnessed that when you deforest an area, rainfall diminishes. Okay, so we got the 2 trees on the camp. We have Dr. Hawthorne, named after a tree. And I believe you know something about God's thumb.
Yeah, so God's thumb in the real world is a nickname given to a type of tree. And it's the nickname for this type of tree, and it's the only it's the only place where God's thumb, like the nickname God's thumb, is actually used. And I actually have a strong belief that this might have been what inspired the author Louis Sachar to name the mountain in Holes God's thumb. And the tree is an Adansonia, and it's nicknamed God's thumb. And I feel
Right.
like might have taken this idea for his book Holes.
Correct. Gee, where am I now? I was trying to pull up that. Yeah, you got the tree name right. Even there you go. I wanted it. Wikipedia does have a page where it refers searches for God's thumb to a choice, either this Adansonia tree or Louis Sachar's book. And so I think you're correct in suggesting that Louis Sachar based that name off his knowledge of this very interesting African tree. There's a beautiful image of it right there. And coincidentally, it is a fruit-bearing tree in contrast to the hawthorn tree. And I don't know, do you think it's meaningful? The fact that it grows in Africa, might that also be meaningful?
The fact that the Adansonia grows in Africa?
Yes, and the hawthorn tree grows in more northern temperate climates.
Maybe the Adansonia depends on hotter places to thrive.
Yeah, it does. But you're treating my question a little too literally. What might the author's message have been? Basically, the children are leaving Dr. Hawthorne's area and going towards the Adansonia. And that's where they are cured, right? That's on God's thumb. That's where the curing happens for
Yeah.
zero.
So maybe this links to our theme about nature in holes, where them going back to the Adansanya tree, a tree that bears fruit, and back to onions, maybe would help their health.
Correct. I want to add a little bit. Since the Adansonia is an African tree, zero is in a way he is cured in an environment that for him is uh, much more than for us his home, a place full of sunshine. Right, Africa is probably the continent that gets the most sunshine, and it also seems to be good for Stanley, but especially for Zero, who arrived on God's thumb very ill. Let's go back to the text. There might be what other points do we want to cover tonight?
Let's see. So we've covered health, nature, and racism so far.
Right.
Oh, and justice system.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's really much more here. I'm going to do a quick scroll. I did some highlights earlier today. Somewhere around here. There we go.
Like a lot of secret messages that the author is trying to show within their books.
Yes. Here is they're joking around. Zero and Stanley are having a good time together. This was also important. Socializing. Stanley appeared to have no friends in school, back home in the city. Wow, so many technical problems tonight. But honestly, this is going to be one of the best podcasts I have.
Yeah, I feel like we had a lot of good discussions tonight.
Absolutely, and you're one of the most articulate students I have. Remarkable for your age. I was saying that Zero and Stanley developed a very good relationship. Probably Stanley's first good friend. He doesn't seem like he had any good friends in school.
Yeah, in school he was being bullied all the time, and I don't think he was just generally having a lot of good time around the other kids there.
Right, and is socializing and friendship important to health?
Yeah, it is, because it can like help you relieve stress, and it also is really important towards your mental health.
Absolutely, and stress influences our health generally. Yeah, here they are. I just highlighted this because they're joking, and the object of their joke is the food that they haven't been eating, all the food that's probably made them sick and overweight.
They mentioned a pepperoni pizza, an ice cream sundae, and a large root beer.
Bananas, hot
Are,
fudge.
and those are actually a lot of the things that they would have been getting outside of Camp Green Lake. But instead of getting those like usual, here they're actually getting onions and dirty water.
Right. When they return from God's thumb, Zero steals the sugar frosted flakes or something, some kind of cereal covered in sugar, highly processed food. So the boys don't really understand yet why they recovered, why they became healthy. They're still attracted.
They still want that food that's actually really bad for them.
Yes. Okay, yeah, Zero is still sick at this point of the story. This is Stanley reflecting on how strong he's become.
So maybe a factor to how strong he's become was that, like, all of this time he was in Camp Green Lake, he was digging huge holes every single day, and this definitely improved his strength a lot from before when he wasn't doing all that exercise.
Correct. Yeah, it wasn't fun exercise, but
Helped him.
it did. Um, Zero is still sick there. He bit into it without peeling it. The hot, bitter juice burst into his mouth. He could feel it all the way up to his eyes. And when he swallowed, he felt its warmth move down his throat and into his stomach. He only ate half, gave the other half to Zero. What a nice friend. He gave him half an onion to eat.
Yeah, that's a good friendship, sharing with each other.
It was, although it seems rather funny on the surface. This curious song that belongs to Stanley's family. If only the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was just a little bit softer. While the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, he cries to the moon, if only, if only. It seems to be about food, but something's very wrong here. Wolves don't try to eat woodpeckers.
Oh, wait, the wolf was waiting to eat the woodpecker.
It looks that way. But that doesn't belong in its diet. It needs to be active, hunting, getting its exercise, not sitting by a tree and waiting for a woodpecker to fall down.
Yeah, I don't think that's what wolves would usually do to
Right.
get their food.
So maybe there's a message here, we should be actively working to get our food, make our food, grow our food. What about this woodpecker?
Um,
Something unnatural there.
the woodpecker is having trouble pecking into the bark of the tree, and it's saying, "What if it was only a bit softer?" But
Right.
normally they wouldn't have that trouble. Woodpeckers were built to really easily be able to peck through the hard bark of trees.
Right. Although there might be a minor point here. I think woodpeckers prefer wood that's rotting, or that's, what's the word? It's been invaded with insects,
Uh,
because that's what they're trying to eat, the insects inside
yeah, the
wood. Right. If it's trying to knock holes into healthy tree, that might be a problem. But I'm not sure. It is a bit odd that it's asking for a softer tree. Well, just go look for a softer tree. Be active, like that silly
yeah,
wolf waiting, doing nothing.
yeah, both the animals in this song for some reason are strangely just not moving when they could have to get food. They're just lazy and just being right there and just hoping for something to happen.
Oh, could we draw another connection to human
Oh,
behavior?
yeah, maybe because we don't work for our food. We just buy it from the grocery store, and that actually comes from, well, farmers' hard work. So maybe the animals in the story symbolize us humans. When we could be working for our food, we aren't doing it.
Right. Yeah, we're passively uh, acquiring our food, sometimes through drive-throughs. The only thing that's missing is having someone spoon feed you. Maybe in the future we can go to a restaurant and be spoon fed. All right, here's the food theme again. She almost died from stomach sickness. It seems she ate some bad meat. So I remember when this novel first attracted my attention, I thought maybe there's a vegan or vegetarian theme here, message. What do you think?
Yeah, perhaps because it was, after all, it was meat that she almost died from stomach sickness from. But you don't see vegetables um like introducing these kind of health concerns.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I think because we process our vegetables, our lettuce heads in big processing plants, the water can be contaminated, and the contaminated water can get on lettuce and other vegetables. So there have been cases. Oh, I lost you. There, you're back.
My battery turned to 10%, so it made a little message there.
Okay, so it's possible that vegetables can also sicken people, but that's usually because bad water has been used to wash them. Um, I don't see any danger in eating raw vegetables, but raw meat, yeah, we don't recommend that. Obviously, uh, lots of bacteria there that could harm us, even kill us. There's the onions again. Here the narrator's being quite clear about his message.
The sleep and the onions had done him a lot of good as well. He felt strong.
Yeah, and adding the element of sleep. Sleep is important.
Yeah, sleep is also definitely a huge part to being healthy.
Right. When my condition was quite severe, I was unable to get more than 2 or 3 good nights of sleep a week. And I thought at one point, I felt I looked like I was at least 10 years older, if not more. Um, Maybe this is the last point. Water. What's the role of water in this story?
Um, well, on God's thumb, they drink dirty water. And this might actually impact how effective this water is, because this dirty water contains some important minerals.
Good observation. I think we even have an interesting, what's that word? An interesting article related to this subject.
The mud article, perhaps?
Yes, where did it go? I'd have to mess around a bit, but yes. Never mind. I'm trying to close that window again. Yes, there was an article about, could you remind me?
Well, there was an article about the health benefits of mud.
Your audio is going out. Could you repeat that?
Well, there was an article on the health benefits of eating mud.
Right. I think it's the fancy term was geophagy or geophagy.
Yeah.
It's apparently an old tradition. It provides, well, they called it the original mineral supplement. And I think there's even some research showing that it releases endorphins, or this happiness, what do we call it? Happiness molecules. I don't know. What's the right term? Chemicals?
Peter, your audio is like bubbling and glitching a bit, so I didn't hear what you just said.
Ah, darn. Is it the sound better now?
Yeah, now it's better.
I see. Okay. I think the research shows that eating mud not only provides minerals, but triggers the release of endorphins or some kind of happiness chemicals. So it seems to be a surprisingly healthy habit, contrary to what most of our cleanliness-obsessed parents might say. Running around in the mud, splashing in muddy puddles, and getting some on your food might actually be a good idea. Yeah, I could make some more comments about this. Their discovery of, they're on the mountain and they're finding water in the ground. And Zero asks, where does it come from? How can it be there? We haven't discussed this yet, but there's a very interesting website called Primary Water Institute, which might answer that question. We don't have time for it right now. I think we should wrap up quickly. Maybe this is a good place to be for the end. This big highlight I've just made about the happiness. Yes.
So in his previous life, before he was sent to Camp Green Lake and everything, he had been unhappy at school because he had no friends there, and there was a lot of different bullies who were picking on him, and nobody liked him. And so he was I think the term could be that his mental health was pretty bad. He was pretty mentally unhealthy, and also he was starting to not like himself because of all the poor treatment he was receiving at school. But later on, when he was at Camp Green Lake and he was on God's thumb with Zero, it says that, quoting the book, 2 nights later, Stanley lay awake staring at the star-filled sky. He was too happy to fall asleep. And so he becomes a lot happier after going to Camp Green Lake, making a really good friend in Zero. And
right.
The general turn of events had just made him a much healthier, much mentally healthier person and a much happier person.
Right. It's somewhat ironic because I'm sure the camp operators didn't expect or didn't intend to make their prisoners happy.
Yeah, I don't think that was what the warden was thinking, but I mean, as
Absolutely.
long as the warden's achieving her own goals, I guess she wouldn't mind too much.
Right. Did the warden eventually achieve her goal?
No.
No.
And she wanted to find the treasure, which she did, but she didn't get to actually keep it.
Right. And I think the message of this book is that the real treasure are things like good food, good friends, good water, good sunshine, good exercise. Not something you can put in a suitcase like a chunk of gold or money.
Yeah, it's a lot about how we keep ourselves healthy and how we interact with others.
Excellent. I agree, and I'm so happy you were able to join me for this podcast. Perhaps we'll do another book in the future. What grade are you in, by the way?
Grade 8.
Grade 8. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kevin Chen.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This is the end of our another Stop BS Now English class podcast. Hope to see everyone again in the future. Hope everyone stays healthy and finds happiness and perhaps health too. Good night.
Good night.